Hi everyone, I'm Jo. I'm one of the tutors for EDF 2005 and this week is my turn to go through some of the areas that we've been covering in our textbook. This presentation will be about Chapter 4 and Chapter 8. And two of the main things that we'll be talking about are motivation and pedagogy. So my groups were fantastic. I was really impressed, and you couldn't get two more different groups presenting. The first one was a drama presentation and the second one was about maths. So what I'd like to begin with is having a look at motivation, and as a teacher of many years, motivation is one of the most important things in getting students on our side and getting them engaged in their learning. Motivation is what influences a person's behaviour. So it's the desire to want to know something. So there are quite a few theories. So behaviourist believes that motivation comes from past experiences and it is influenced by rewards and punishment. So the desire to do something comes externally. It is what is referred to as extrinsic motivation. In our drama presentation on Thursday afternoon, the girls used extrinsic motivation such as giving out lollies, and also by using things like smiling, making eye contact, engaging them in the learning, in fact using their own kinesthetic movements within the drama class to engage the students. So the girls gave permission for their students to be silly, which is an easy thing to do, and so it automatically motivated the students into participating in the activities. Another area where people believe that learning is innately active and the rewards are not necessary for the motivation. These are the social cognitivists. They think that if students find success instead of failure, they are more motivated to learn, and so this comes from the inside and is reflected in intrinsic motivation. So the desire to do better, the desire like, oh yes, I can do this, I think I can manage the next step. So part of that is also very good scaffolding, where you make the activity at the level of the student with a little bit more of a challenge, and so once they achieve that challenge, they're willing to take it on because they've experienced that form of success. And I always have a rule in my classes that you've got to be able to see that everyone is experiencing some form of success, no matter how small. It doesn't really matter, but for the student it is a major thing to keep them motivated. On the other hand, the humanists, they link motivation to achievement and education and to the student's well-being. So it kind of reflects the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where if the student's basic needs, physiological needs are met, it actually leads to the motivation that is required in a humanist perspective. Now, each of these has strengths and weaknesses, but as teachers we need to enable our students to learn. And so in each different class you might be able to do things in one class that you can't do in another, and some classes will be motivated by some of the activities you do and others just won't. So it is a kind of practice, or really it's about getting to know your students or learning your students. So one of the things that the chapter also talks about is emotions, and they play a significant role in the motivation of students. So if you think about where your children have been, where were they before they got to your class? What was happening in their lives before they got to your class? How are they feeling emotionally? Because there is lots of research that suggests that this impacts on how and why and when and if they learn in your classes. So we talk a lot about hooks in our classrooms, and you really need to build up a big kind of volume of the different hooks that you can get students into your classroom. So it could be an element of surprise, it could be creative, it could be imaginative, curiosity, anything that would hook them in. So my students hook them in by engaging them in a collaborative kind of group where everyone, like I said before, had an opportunity, and the girls gave them permission to be silly, and so they buzzed around like bees for a little while, and so it kind of got their self-confidence up and their self-esteem. Oh yes, I can do this, and they built the activities up in a kind of a scaffolding manner. So it was a really clever idea of how to get the students involved in my class. Now, the chapter also goes on to talk about the two greatest influences of motivation, part of the limbic system of the brain. So it's all in your head kind of thing. So there were two particular areas, the amygdala and the hippocampus. So the amygdala is associated with the fight or flight, and it depends on which part is activated that determines the response of what's going to happen. And so meaningful learning can engage powerful emotions, and especially when there's a small dose of a risk. There is some increasing research that indicates that a presence of fear, stress, anxiety, and other emotional responses do have a major impact, and that goes to back to where I was talking about what happened to the student before they got to your class, and what are you going to do to make them safe and get them motivated into learning. Now, there is quite a lot of research that suggests that humour reduces stress and anxiety in students, so you might want to try this. But remember, there is a fine line between the humour and sarcasm, and you need to be very careful about that. So that's the amygdala. In the hippocampus, works in conjunction with the amygdala, and it triggers emotions. It triggers the emotions, and then the hippocampus decides where to park it. So if you think about a campus and parking, that's a really good way to understand what's going on. So once the amygdala decides that it's worth keeping, it sends it to the hippocampus, who then parks it in the right kind of area. So if it is a novel and emotional activity, it has a greater chance of finding a parking, so to speak, and a greater chance of actually being remembered by the students. So how does this all connect with engaging and motivating our students in the learning? Well, I've written down a couple of points that I really want you to remember. So the first one in motivation, and very, very important for teachers to understand, is that you need to expect that your students will succeed. You need to believe they can. You need to implement strategies that will help them to achieve. You never ever give up on your students. You do challenge them, but challenge them only a small amount at a time, so then they can get to the next step. You need to offer feedback regularly, and I've always said to my colleagues, and I've mentioned it to my class, that wherever possible, and even when it's not, I want you to really think about providing feedback from one assessment before you give the other assessment, so that the students know where to come back to. And if you think about your secondary school years, I'm sure that you waited quite a long time for some essays to come back to you, and you just weren't sure about how to move on to the next step without that feedback. So feedback is very, very important. Scaffolding their learning, the girls did a really great job with this, with their three major activities that they did in the presentation. The first was about a collaborative task, so everybody got into it, and then the next one they built on that, and then they built on that and built some more. So classroom is also about providing a safe and comfortable environment, and I think by engaging the students the whole time, and I noticed that when one of my students happened to be a little bit late, one of the girls got to him really quickly and explained what they were doing and invited him in. It's also about learning your students, and I talk a lot about this on my blog if you're interested, but it's more than knowing. It's about really, really learning them and learning where they're coming from, learning how they learn. It's also about making your expectations clear, and the girls who did the drama presentation were very good at this, really explaining the task and showing them and making an example. So here's how we do it, and using the group of three to actually inform the students of what they were expecting. It's also about celebrating the success. You know, you did really well, praise where praise is due, and also teaching them how to come back from failure. So, you know, it's all right to make a mistake, and that's how we learn, and that's part of the motivation. So you really need to model that in your classes. So that was the first one. I'd now like to talk a little bit about pedagogy, and my second presentation another group of girls did was about area and volume of different, basic shapes. So they introduced it by holding prior knowledge, like giving the students an opportunity to discuss what they knew about how to find the area and the volume of the different shapes. So pedagogy, if you think about it, is the how of the learning. So you have your knowledge, which is the what, your pedagogy, which is the how is that going to happen, how is it going to be learned, how are you going to present it, all of those things, and then the learner. And it's all about the learner, so you need to start with who you're teaching, and that's what I talk about when I'm mentioning that knowing your students is very important. It is the why factor, like who are your learners and how are you going to identify those needs and work yourself to it. So, you know, in the book it's described, pedagogy is described as the art and science of teaching, learning and the profession. So it's an encompassing kind of value. And my favourite part, an explanation by Anderson about what pedagogy is. And I just want to read it out to you because I think it's really important. Pedagogy determines how teachers think and act. Pedagogy affects students' lives and expectations. Pedagogy is the framework for discussions about teaching and the process by which we do our jobs as teachers. Pedagogy is a body of knowledge that defines us as professionals. Pedagogy is a belief that all children can learn and that it is the duty of the adult to participate in that growth and development. Pedagogy is a definition of culture and a means to transmit that culture to the next generation. So pedagogy is an umbrella kind of term. The girls used it very well by way of collaboration. Now, collaboration is an important kind of skill that students need to know. And as students yourselves, you know, you probably hate group work. When people mention group work, you know, 2/3 of the class just think, oh, I don't want to work with this person, I don't want to do this. The girls really engaged the class by breaking them up into 3 groups, and each of them went to one of the groups and they did a different task. And I thought it was really engaging in the way that they did it. They used motivation in different ways with each of their groups. So I noticed that one girl used praise, where praise was due. Another one was very, very patient and kind of allowed their students time to think the problem through before attending to it. She had a very gentle manner, which really kind of stimulated the students into working out their own problem. Third girl kind of looked at it from a perspective of giving them time, so not letting them worry about, oh, I don't have enough time to do this. You know, it's about nurturing your students, and each of the groups kind of acknowledged their teacher in a different kind of way. All of the groups interacted quite differently with each of the different teachers. So it was really amazing to watch them as they moved around. And after the task of making folding shapes to make the actual 3 dimensions, the girls then moved away from their group and left them with the problem of working out volume and area from each of the shapes that they had made, which I thought was really quite clever because it motivated the students, and it actually gave them the reasons why. So the reasons behind why they had made this suddenly became clear, and they went about discussing the problem as the actual teachers, the students who were the teachers, moved from their group into another group to ask the students, now, how did you work the problem out? I thought it was a really clever way of engaging students with the different kinds of teaching that they kind of took on. So in the end, as teachers, we really do need to nurture these students and, you know, make sure that they feel that they belong to your group and that they feel safe, that they have freedom to make choice, which the girls really did well by stepping away, experiencing fun and enjoyment, and there was a lot of that in both of the sessions. So, you know, it's okay to have fun. It is okay to have fun, and also to feel empowered in their learning. In that second group where they had to work out the problem, then they had to discuss how they used it in real life. So it gave meaning to what they were learning. And that, as well as a motivational theory, it gives the why. Why are we doing this and why is it important? So students need to know that they are listened to, that they are respected, that they're known, but also, most importantly, pedagogy connects teaching with learning and does give us purpose. So all in all this week, I thought both groups did a really brilliant job of bringing the idea of motivation and pedagogy. I think the students had lots of fun as well as lots of learning that happened. So I encourage you to read the chapter. It is a good chapter, and good luck with the rest of the semester. Thanks a lot, everyone.